So we are back. Welcome back, everybody. Dr. Merrell from the University of Exeter will share a few insights now on how rural enterprise hubs can stimulate rural development. So Ian, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nikos. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you very well. Do you want us to run the presentation from our end here?
Yes, please.
Sure. Okay, just give us a nod when you're ready to move on to the next slide.
No problem. So thank you everybody for inviting me today. Some of you may remember that I came to LECO in 2017, which feels like a long time ago now, to present this research when it was in its early stages. So I've returned now to present the results as well. I'm at the University of Exeter, but at the time I was at Newcastle University, and I will be returning there next month as well. Next slide, please, Nikos. So we'll start with just what rural enterprise hubs are. These are physical infrastructures where businesses can come to conduct business. These consist of offices and meeting rooms, sometimes co-working spaces as well, which is becoming quite a popular trend, as well as having a shared kitchen space, which is really good for businesses to talk to each other over lunchtime. As well as including these physical services, they also include a range of support services. This helps to distinguish what a hub is compared to normal office spaces. So some of the support services that hubs can offer could be networking groups or opportunities to network with the other tenants, as well as things like seminars and other learning opportunities. Sometimes regional development agencies or local business associations will come to present about future funding opportunities, for example, or training in things like social media or accountancy and things like this, as well as having social events as well, which have been proved to be very popular. An enterprise hub can have many different ownership, so it could be public, private or third sector, and they come in many different shapes and sizes. I'll include a different hub on the right hand side of each slide, just to give you a different idea of some of the shapes and sizes that they come in. It's important to note as well that there was some previous research done which classified the hubs into two different types, honeypots and hives, which is following a bee analogy. A honeypot is where the businesses in the hubs are primarily aimed at serving their customers directly. So this will be things like retail, tourism, things like this, whereas hives are more business to business transactions. So these could be accountancy firms, website designers, various things like that. Next slide, please, Nikos. Just very briefly, the research that I did was a PhD. My supervisors were Jeremy and Matthew and Paul, all of whom you probably met throughout this project, particularly Matthew Gorton, who's here today. It was in the northeast of England, mainly Northumberland and parts of County Durham, which are very, very rural, probably the most rural part of England at least. Maybe not so much Wales and Scotland, but definitely the most rural part of England. There was multiple public sector organisations involved. I won't get into these too much today because we don't have a lot of time, but it's interesting to note the third one, Rural Connect, was an initiative that was set up to network the hubs together to learn best practice from, as well as to distribute some of the funding for the network as well. I went to 8 case study hubs during the time. I spent a week at each one interviewing the tenants and the hub managers, as well as interviewing a range of policymakers as well. So we had sort of 3 different levels, all the way from the people at the top who were setting the policies and distributing the funding, all the way down to the tenants themselves who were in the hubs. Next slide, please, Nico. So I'll talk about some of the results now. There's 3 levels of results. The first one we'll talk about is the sort of high end, what hubs can do for regional development and particularly for rural development as well. So as we know, there's quite a shortage of workspaces in rural areas. So just being able to provide that was a massive benefit for the rural economy. You know, a lot of rural businesses might work at home, or they might have to travel into a town or a city to be able to work. So having these close on their doorstep was very beneficial. We also found that it was a very good way that business support agencies could deliver support to a lot of rural businesses a lot easier than they were previously able to do. You know, there's large distances between rural businesses, so many agencies find it hard to deliver this support if they have to travel significant different distances. So this was a good way that we could get lots of rural businesses together in one room to be able to deliver the support to, let's say, 20 businesses at a time rather than 1 or 2 at a time. They also are a way of tying rural areas into territorial innovation systems. There are many of these, but the most popular ones at the minute are smart specialization and the triple helix model, as well as the ecosystem approach as well. So this was a very good way of tying rural areas into these systems, which are largely developed in urban areas, large towns and cities. So this gave a route, let's say, from that centralized system to make it more decentralized and into rural areas. So that was very interesting. Also, through the work of Rural Connect, there was some excellent connections between the hubs as well. Lots of valuable lessons were learned between the managers of how to operate the hub, some of the best facilities to offer, some of the best services to offer. So being able to network between the hubs themselves proved to be very beneficial as well. Some of them had a tourism element as well. Not all of them, but some of the ones that were honeypots largely helped to develop regional tourism as well. Tourists could show up in quite a remote location and find a selection of businesses that might be able to offer guided tours or sell their services, souvenirs, things like this. Sorry, my computer seems to be pinging quite a lot of messages at the minute. And another important finding was that it could counter out-migration. So a lot of businesses who were thinking about moving to the city, this could help stop that flow. Next slide, please, Nikos. The next results that I'll discuss were benefits on the tenants for themselves. So this was the 40 interviews that I did with the tenants. This is boiling down these results into a few takeaway messages. One of the first impressions that I got from the tenants was how the hub helped their well-being. A lot of rural businesses work at home and they feel quite isolated, and a lot of home working businesses find it hard to separate work and life. So going out of the house and being able to separate work from home life was very important for people, and to make new friends as well. That was very important. The next one was an increase of productivity. I would say that at a guess, 70 to 80% of tenants said that their business had become more productive from being in the hub. This would include small things by, being less distracted by interruptions at home, to actually being able to, significantly increase the amount of business that they were getting. Linked to this as well was the ability to grow. A lot of small businesses, particularly those working at home, can't employ members of staff very easily. So the hub and having an office to go to was a great way for the businesses to be able to hire new staff. So that was a definite positive effect. Linked with social isolation was the increased networking opportunities that the tenants had as well. So being able to talk to other businesses, sometimes about quite technical things like planning restrictions or accountancy, taxes, things like this that all businesses need. They found that very useful to be able to talk to other people about that, and then also in more arranged groups like the networking groups that they created as well. You know, tied to that as well as the next point around acquiring knowledge. Lots of businesses found that they were able to improve their business by having better access to a group of other businesses who were in a similar situation to themselves. And then in a few occasions as well, some of the tenants decided to create new products together or to work in collaboration together to acquire bigger contracts than they might have necessarily acquired if they were operating alone, and some nice synergies as well. Sometimes synergies between the hub management and the tenants, or sometimes between the tenants. Next slide, please. So we're planning on writing a piece quite shortly about some of the determinants that can help an enterprise hub manager become more successful if they wanted to set up a new hub or if they wanted to improve their hubs in general. There's a set of external factors that affect hubs. I found in my research that some of the hubs were quite close to towns, whereas some of them were very remote, and they have different markets. So it's very important to conduct market analysis before you establish a hub. And also in some regions, there are policies which will help hubs to set up new hubs. So having policies that are encouraging hubs would be very good if you were a regional policymaker or a national policymaker. The management of the hubs were found to be absolutely key. The managers themselves, if you had a very proactive and a very enthusiastic manager, the tenants tended to find that they had more benefits than if the manager was vacant a lot of the time or away from the hub itself. The management know their tenants better than anyone, so they're very good people to help broker new relationships between the tenants, and also to bring in people from the wider ecosystem as well, to give talks or training seminars, things like this. And acting flexibly as management was found to be a very good way to be a successful hub as well. So if you have your tenants in mind, let's say when you're designing support services or the space itself, and accommodating the tenants as well. Sometimes tenants might have asked if they could move to a larger office if they were employing someone, for example. So acting flexibly and having the core focus was found to be a determinant of success. Also being able to forge a niche as well, which is linked to the next point as well. If you can get a group of tenants together who are in the same sector or share the same interests, more collaborations can be formed, more knowledge can be exchanged between the tenants, which is relevant for them. So if you have tenants who are homogenous, that proves to be quite successful in a hub as well. It's not critical. We found some very successful hubs that had tenants that operated in completely different sectors to each other who still found value in being in the hub. It just helps if they have similar interests. The quality of the facilities is obvious. If you have really good office space and good meeting rooms, people will come and look around the hub and be inspired to join the hub. We also found as well that being either a honeypot or a hive is good, but sometimes if you mix the two models and become a hybrid between the two, there can be some issues there that sometimes lots of members of the public will come into the hub when some of the businesses want to be, you know, working in a quiet environment and a little more secluded. So it's best to not mix these two models if possible. Next slide, please. So just quickly as well, what's next for me and what's next in developing this agenda around business hubs and enterprise hubs. There's lots of work currently being done. It seems like hubs has become quite a buzzword and quite a core focus of policymakers since I started my research on it. There's people working on digital hubs, particularly in the Netherlands. At the University of Groningen, they're doing quite a lot of work around digital hubs, transport hubs as a way of overcoming some of the issues with rural public transport, creative hubs, which are full of artists and other creative types, and innovation hubs as well, which tie into regional innovation systems and ecosystems. For myself, I'll be starting a new fellowship next month back again at the CRE and their new initiative, the National Innovation Centre for Rural Enterprise. That will be working alongside Matthew and Jeremy again and Paul. And I'm very much looking forward to that. Part of that work, I'll be working with a private company called Hatchery, which are based in the south of England, and they have very ambitious plans to create a lot of enterprise hubs across rural areas of England. And I'll be working with them to create a evaluation process, so when their tenants arrive, they can monitor, say, for example, how much they've grown since entering the hub, how many more people they've employed, how satisfied they are with the services of the hub. So that will create a longitudinal data set, which we can use for as long as we want going forward. So that will be a great resource to develop. I'm currently also working on a research project with Digit, who are a funder in the UK. That's with Professor Gary Bosworth, who's at Northumbria University. And this is working on a typology for rural co-working spaces. This is working internationally across Europe, England, and a couple in America as well. So that will be finishing, I think, June next year, and we should be able to share the results with that hopefully in 2021. And I just briefly wanted to touch on how COVID has potentially affected the future of hubs. I've been speaking to a lot of hub operators in the last few months, and there tends to be a sentiment that of positivity as well as negativity. Some people think that the future of hubs is going to be positive, that lots of people have discovered that they don't have to commute into cities or towns every day, and that they can actually work from home, and that employers are becoming a lot more used to this idea of their employers working from home. And, you know, these people will need meeting rooms, they'll need stable internet connections and things like this. So that looks like it could be a positive. Some of the hub managers recently have been explaining to me that they're having real difficulties with social distancing in particular, not allowing all of their tenants to come in at the same time. So they have to timetable or schedule their tenants coming in. So yeah, that's everything. Next slide, Nikos, please. I've just left a couple of email addresses there. If you want to contact me before the end of December, it'll be the top one. If you want to contact me after December, it'll be the Newcastle one. And thank you very much for listening and having me back again.
That's great, Ian. Thank you very much for this insightful presentation and the impressive work done with enterprise hubs over there. So I would like to invite Dr. Pattanapong Tiwasing from Coventry University, who will now present an impact analysis on new technologies for rural SMEs.
You see my screen?
Yes, Pattanapong, we can see your screen, we can see you, and we can hear you.
Right, okay, good. Yep. All right. Hello, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Pattanapong Tiwasing. I am a research fellow from the Center for Business in Society, Coventry University. Today I'm going to talk about the impact analysis of new technology for rural economy SMEs. For people who are familiar with INNOGROW project before, this is an evidence-based analysis of the activity A1.1 that I did with when I was at Newcastle with my team, Matthew Gordon and Jeremy Phillipson. And I am very happy to share the key finding of these results, with you today. Let's start the introduction now. The main objectives of this activity is to analyze the impact of the selected new technology on rural SMEs competitiveness in order to provide policymakers with an overview of the economics and environmental benefits of the main new technologies for rural SMEs competitiveness and productivity, and to improve their capacity on implementing policies that promote the adoption of new technology and business model innovation in INNOGROW regions. To do this, we apply the conceptual framework for drivers of economic growth following the UK government's productivity approach. There are 5 key drivers that interact to underlie long-term productivity and competitiveness, which are enterprise, skills, innovation, competition, and investment. In this analysis, we mainly focus on the innovation, which can take the form of new technology. And the use of new technology can then improve economic growth, such as improving productivity, job generation, improving market accessibility, and generating more profit. And we also apply the notion of unified theory of acceptance and the use of technologies to explain the degree of user intentions to use new technology and subsequently changing their behavior. There are 4 main concepts, which are performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social inference, and facilitating conditions. For performance expectancy, it can refer to the degree to which the users expect that using technology can help them to attain gain in job performance. For effort expectancy, it can refer to the level of easiness when using the technology. For social inference, it's kind of the situation that whereby the users decide to use new technology, which is influenced by the others, such as family member, friends, and business competitors. And for facilitating conditions, it can refer to the key resources or suitable resources that help enable the users to use particular technology for their businesses. The first 3 concepts, they are the indirect determinant of behavioral intention. And the last one is the direct determinant of use behavior. And there are also indirect determinants that influence both intention and behavior, such as gender, age, or experience. We apply both conceptual framework and this theory to design our online questionnaire. And we mainly focus on 12 new technology that has been adopted in rural area in INNOGROW regions. And they can be divided into 3 main categories, which are innovative production technology and product distribution technology, and also process and also product safety technology. And this is the list of the selected technology that we focus on. And for the data collection, we mainly targeted the manager director and the owner of SMEs located in rural area. We following, the definition, like rural urban definition and SME definition from European Commission. From the questionnaire in this presentation, I will mainly talk about, the three sections. The first one, I will talk about the case characteristics of our observations, and then I will talk about the need, enabler, and barrier for adoption of new technology. And the last one, I'm going to talk about the impact of all cases on rural SME competitiveness. So for the case characteristics, the total observation of our analysis are 68 manager and director from 8 countries across the INNOGROW regions. Only 53 observations that completed all questions. And the majority of our participants are micro businesses, which have the number of employees less than 10 employees. And almost 70% of our participants have turnover less than 2 million a year. Around 32% of our participants operated their businesses in agricultural industry, followed by food and beverage, manufacturing, and then forestry. If you look at the top bar here, this interesting for the policy makers. If you look at this top bar, actually, there are a variety of, businesses that located in rural area. So it's not just only, agriculture or forestry. There are a lot of, businesses that we cannot identify them into the core industry here. And 15% of our participants adopted technology relating to precision agriculture, followed by internal products, traceability system, and then renewable energy. And again, if you look at the top bar here, there are a variety of, the type of technology that has been adopted in rural area in INNOGROW region. Now I'm going to talk about the needs, enabler, and barriers for rural SME to adopt new technology to improve their competitiveness. So when we talk about the competitiveness in this analysis, we mainly focus on 3 dimensions of competitiveness, which are job generation, market accessibility, and profitability. And in this table, I will look at the needs or the main reason for rural SME to adopt new technology to improve their competitiveness. For the first, by each dimension. For the first group, job dimension and no job dimension, there are no significantly different in the main reason for technology adoption between SME with job generation and no job generation. For market accessibility, we found that SME with access to new market are more likely to identify the ability to identify market opportunity and the satisfaction of customers' needs as the main reason for them to adopt new technology. To me, actually, this is not a surprise, when SME, they know their target market or their target customer, and they will actually, sell their product to them and then expand their market. For profitability, we found that SME with profitability are more likely to identify the personal interest in the new technology as the main reason to adopt new technology compared to those who don't, generate profit. I think the reason for this is that the personal interest actually can encourage, the manager or people to learn more about the technology that they are interested in. So this will allow them to better understand how to use that technology effectively and subsequently improve their competitiveness and generate more income and profit at the end. For the enabler of technology adoption by rural SME to competitiveness, to improve their competitiveness. If you look at the first group, job generation, you will see that SME with job generation are more likely to identify the private and external funding as the main supporter for them to adopt new technology compared to those who don't generate more jobs. And for market accessibility group, SME with access to new markets are more likely to identify, the employees with relevant skills and knowledge and advisory services as the main supporter to them to adopt new technology compared to businesses, those who don't access to new market. And there are no significantly different in the main enabler between SME with profitability and no profitability. However, if you look at the percentage of people cited the internal capital, actually the percentage here is quite high for two groups and high for across, 3 dimensions. Is actually to support, the rural SME to adopt new technology. Actually, it depends on the firm or the owner, the decision from the owner. Now we're going to talk about, the main barrier experienced by rural SME to adopt new technology to improve their competitiveness. For job generation group, there are no significantly different in the main barrier between two groups. For market accessibility, we found that SME with no access to new market are more likely to identify lack of funding, lack of customer demand as the main reason, as a main barrier for them to adopt new technology compared to those who access to new markets. However, SME with access to new market are more likely to identify the competition in the industry as the main barrier for them to adopt new technology. And for profitability group, we found that SME with no profitability are more likely to identify limited support or regulation, lack of funding, lack of customer demand, and also difficulty in establishing effective collaboration with supply chain partner as the main barrier for them to adopt new technology compared to those who generate more profit. And now I'm going to talk about the impact of all cases that I mentioned earlier on SME, on rural SME competitiveness. So due to the small sample size, so we have to apply the discriminant function analysis to determine the set of variables that are effective to predict the rural SME competitiveness. In other words, we will identify the key variable or the key determinant in each function for job generation function, market accessibility function, and also profitability functions. And this is the result for job generation function. And as you can see from here, this is the variable or the determinant that I include in the equation 1. I include turnover, and due to the small sample size, I cannot include all core industries. So I have to divide them into 3 sectors, main 3 sectors, which are primary sectors such as agriculture, forestry, and so on. And for secondary sector, is like manufacturing, food, and beverage services. And for tertiary sector, such as accommodation or tourism, and also the other group. And I also include experience years here. Actually, I also include business size, like micro business, small business, and medium business, and also some variable of obstacles like finance, like funding and regulation support. The result of the job generation functions show that micro businesses and lack of funding are negatively associated with job generation. However, small businesses are positively associated with job generation. Our results actually are in line with the literature that small business or medium business, actually they are a main engine, a job engine in European unions. However, that's why it show a positive side. And however, the negative side for micro businesses can be explained that because micro business, they are typically operated by family or family business, and they are not likely to hire people from outside to work for their businesses. That's why it shows a negative side in our analysis. And for market accessibility function, we found that turnover, primary sector, and micro businesses are positively associated with access to new market. However, we found that tertiary sector, medium businesses, lack of funding, lack of regulation support are negatively associated with access to new market. From this table, what interesting to me is the negative results of business size and tertiary sector. For the negative size of medium businesses, I think this can be explained by that medium businesses are more likely to have the same target customer or the same target market as large company. So without government support or business support, they may not be able to compete with large company. This will result in a high competition in the market for medium businesses. And for the positive side of micro businesses, I think this can be explained by that because for micro business, like if they can access to local new market, they can claim that this is my new market already. So they don't actually face a very high competitive as the same as medium businesses. That's why it shows a positive side in our analysis. And for negative results of tertiary sector, I think because this sector actually they are tourism and accommodation, they mainly provide like services for customer. So being located in rural area might be difficult for them to reach the new market or the new customer because of having poor digital infrastructure, poor internet connection, and also lack of good public transportation system and so on. That's why this show a negative side in our results. And finally, the final function for firm profitability, we found that lack of funding, lack of regulation support are negatively associated with profitability functions. So the policymaker needs to think about how to provide suitable funding or provide enough support for rural SME to improve their competitiveness. So now we come to the conclusion. The main requirement for rural SME to adopt new technologies are access to new market or identify market opportunity, and also encourage the owner or people to use effective technology for their businesses. And also we found that rural SME are mainly affected by lack of technological expert, lack of relevant market information, and also shortage of skilled workers, and financial difficulty, unfavorable regulation condition, and also market regulation still constitute a significant obstacle to adopt new technology for rural SME in INNOGROW regions. And to strengthen rural SME competitiveness, policy and business support need to be designed for specific business size and sector. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Pattanapong. This was indeed very interesting and data-packed presentation. So I would like to ask everybody here, all our attendees, if they have any questions and clarifications needed on presentations delivered by Ian and Pattanapong, please share them in the Q&A section of this webinar, so we will discuss them either after Matt's presentation or during the open dialogue session. So please keep those questions, keep coming. So, Professor Matt Gordon from the University of Newcastle and the National Innovation Center for Rural Enterprise will now wrap up the experts view session. Matt, we very much look forward to hear which business models could stimulate a post-COVID-19 rural startups ecosystem.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be with you. This presentation offers some preliminary thoughts on rural business startup and business models looking ahead. It was written with colleagues at Newcastle and draws on some of our preliminary experiences from the new National Innovation Centre for Rural Enterprise, which has just commenced operations with Jeremy as its director. So what I thought it would be interesting to do is look at three big issues. So what's the nature of COVID-19 for businesses, looking at the big picture? What's the impact on the demand side and consumer markets looking ahead, particularly in light with other trends within consumer markets? And finally, trying to draw out what are the implications for startup business models and rural business support, which is clearly at the heart of INNOGROW. It's not intended to be all-encompassing, but I hope that some of the ideas will be of interest to participants and we're able to stimulate some discussion. Industries are always undergoing some degree of change. So there will be new entrants, new products and so forth. But often that is quite incremental in nature. However, there may be other times where change is quite rapid. And Andrew Grove, who was the legendary former CEO and chairman of Intel, said that these periods can be called strategic inflection points. So they are points in time where balance of forces change within markets. So the old ways of doing business give way to new ways of doing business. And during a strategic inflection point, it's often difficult for businesses to have a clear idea who their competitors are. They may change quite rapidly, and also the ways in which they've operated previously, which may have been very successful, can often lose their effectiveness. So they have to come up with new ways of doing business to survive. And it seems to me that COVID-19 has been an external shock, which for many markets has acted as a strategic inflection point. Now, when markets change, firms have to innovate to realign their strategy and internal capabilities with realities. So we saw that this morning in Clara's presentation about the experiences of the Czech local shop and how they had to adapt to COVID. So whenever we have this change in the market environment, firms need to innovate, and sometimes what's required is incremental, or what's known as sustaining innovation. So these are things which reinforce the existing business model or a slight adjustments to it. Or in other cases, what's required is much more disruptive, so discontinuous, or what's known in the literature as recombinant innovation. Now, the more dramatic the changes are in an operating environment, the more likely that radical change is required in business strategy. So discontinuous, recombinant innovation. And that seems to me what has been the challenge to many businesses of COVID-19. So it's required them to change their operations to survive quite significantly. And often established firms can struggle with discontinuous innovation. So established market players, market leaders, they're often very good at incremental innovation, but they struggle with this discontinuous or recombinant innovation. Maybe their cost structures, their fixed costs don't allow it, maybe their mental maps, how they look at markets, leads to situations where they struggle with this type of innovation. And that can create opportunities for new entrants. Mintzberg distinguishes between what's known as deliberate strategy. So this is a strategy which is planned in advance and is based on anticipated opportunities. And that's different from emergent strategy, which is more ad hoc, pragmatic, and based on trial and error in the light of unanticipated opportunities and problems. Now, in certain circumstances, deliberate strategy is most appropriate, and in others, emergent strategy will be more useful. And in periods of rapid environmental change, emergent strategy, so this more ad hoc trial and error approach, is often preferable because things are changing so rapidly, competitors are changing, it's difficult to pre-plan. But if we look at how startup businesses are prepared by small business support agencies, it is often geared up to preparing a business plan prior to the firm commencing operations. So it's very much a deliberate strategy. And that may not be that appropriate in the current market climate. So it may be best to actually focus on a more emergent strategy, trial and error, try things out on a small scale, get them right before thinking about scaling up and implementation. And recently I've been reading quite a few books on startup and enterprise, some academic books and non-academic. And I was struck by a comment of Mark Randolph, who was one of the co-founders of Netflix. And he said one of the big problems which entrepreneurs face, one of their big pitfalls, is they build up a picture in their mind which becomes increasingly elaborate, increasingly planned strategy, but it bears no relation to what will work in real life. So rather than having this big focus on planning in advance, it's actually much better often to try things out in a cost-effective way. So if some things fail, that's fine, but move on very quickly and don't waste money on it. So don't throw good money after bad. And I think this has implications for thinking about rural small businesses. So many rural small businesses are home-based businesses. These are often dismissed as being small scale, micro, not very important, maybe in some cases, not the professional basis to start a business. But in actual fact, if we look at it in Randolph and emerging strategies approach, then starting a business in the home might be a smart strategy. So to start it in the home in the lowest cost possible environment to see if it works, what's possible and what's not possible, before committing lots of resources to it. And once firms are able to work through and develop a value proposition in the home, then they can think about maybe the hubs and the incubators, which Ian and others talked about earlier on. Let's move on to our second question now. So Jeremy and me were involved in a briefing paper, putting together a briefing paper on some of the impacts of COVID-19 on rural economies earlier this year over the summer. And we picked out a number of key trends which are happening in terms of the demand side. So shift from out-of-home consumption to in-home consumption, rapid decline in economic activity, with wider job insecurity, with economic and psychological effects, and also a big loss and decrease in mobility. So mobility for work in terms of commuting, but also regarding socializing and shopping and leisure activities, within which the agri-food sector's demand has held up remarkably well. So we need to try and think about those trends in light of wider industry trends. So if we look at consumer markets, so big picture on consumer markets, where should firms be located? Well, if we go back 20 years, it was seen as the best place for firms to be positioned is in terms of what's known as the big middle. So this was focusing on the middle classes in Europe and North America, where the majority of the purchasing power was seen to rest. The alternatives were a low-priced segment, which would be cost-based, but that was seen as shrinking as consumer incomes rise over time and not the most attractive. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there is an innovative set of niches. So these could be innovation based upon new technologies, or it could be luxury segments, but these are small scale. Some of them may grow into the big middle, but often they're at the margins. So the thought is that consumer facing companies ought to aim at this big middle class purchasing power segment. Now, if we look at how markets have changed in the last 20 years, we see a huge reversal of fortunes. Maybe the clothing market is the best illustration of that. So what we've seen is a growth at the lower end in terms of the low price or the value segment, so the bottom of the pyramid. So that's grown enormously, both online and offline. And also there's been a growth at the high end in terms of luxury or specialty clothing, particular niches, they've grown well. Whereas the big middle, where firms used to be wanted to position, that has collapsed. So that has fared the worst. Many firms which are located in that market, the traditional department stores and variety stores, those have collapsed and gone into the in trouble segment. So we need to think about rural businesses in terms of maybe what opportunities there are at cost-based advantages, but also in terms of innovation. So that brings us on to our final question, which is trying to think about some of the implications of this for business models. Perich identifies 4 components of a business model, and it's useful to think about these in light of the implications for rural businesses. So our value proposition is essentially, what is the offering to customers? What do they deliver? What benefits? And here, I think we need to think about, well, what can rural economies offer at both the high end? So that may be in terms of technologically based innovation, or it may be in terms of consumer niches, but also in terms of potentially what cost advantages rural businesses may have. And that's particularly important for startups which lack an established brand name and reputation, where enhanced cost savings against established competitors is quite important for them to become a player within a market. The second aspect is value capture. So this is how the value proposition is converted into financial returns for the business. So in terms of their costs and their profitability. Here, one of the key things for rural businesses is to try and think about how they can deliver financial savings alongside social or environmental benefits as well. So if we think about what might be viable business models for rural businesses, it could be where they address grand challenges in ways in which have financial benefits, but also these social and environmental benefits as well. So for example, rural areas have a quite high significant population which is elderly. And there may be technological advances which allow elderly people to maintain living independently for longer. Now that has a financial benefit in terms of reducing the costs of care and implications for the health service, but it can also improve their quality of life, deliver social benefits through better independent living. The third aspect of a business model is value creation. So this is how firms create value from their resources and their processes. And it's interesting here to draw on a couple of experiences from NISA's interaction with our business service partners. So as part of NISA, we have two intermediaries which liaise with lots of businesses. So one is an estate management organization, and the other is a very large chain of accountants. If we look at the first, the estate management, who deal predominantly with landowners, they're the key issue for value creation at the moment for their rural businesses and their business model is thinking about how they can create value from agricultural land outside of agricultural commodity production. So whether that is decarbonisation or environmental services, or through clean energy and green growth. For the non-agricultural businesses associated through our accountancy partner, one of the key issues there is to do with digital and data. So repeatedly, firms say to us that they have more data than ever, that they're drowning in the data, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to convert that data into better business decisions. And in some cases that they know that that data has value, either value to them or value to others, but how actually to convert that, how to create the value from it is something which they struggle. And finally, value network is the system of other actors. So these can be private sector actors like suppliers and distributors, but also public sector actors, the support agencies, which enable firms to create and deliver value. And here, I think there are a couple of things which is important to bear in mind. That because of the strategic inflection point, the networks which firms often require now may be very different to what they required 5 or 10 years ago. So if we speak to restaurateurs today, they will often say that their most important relationship currently is with platform businesses like Just Eat or Uber Eats, because that's what their survival currently depends on. But if we went back 5 or 10 years ago and said to a restaurateur, how important is a platform business to your survival, then it would seem a very strange statement indeed. We also need to think about the nature of support agencies in terms of how they create value. So here, I think we can say the importance of home-based businesses to rural economies is important, and not to discriminate against them, but rather to see them as a vehicle for low-cost experimentation and emergent strategy. And also thinking about the business hubs, which Ian talked about, as the next stage. So once a firm has established a viable business proposition, maybe in the home, that there are facilities which enable them to grow on a flexible basis in the future. The final point I'd like to make in terms of the value network is that this has often been seen purely from a business perspective. And one of the things which COVID has demonstrated is the importance of mental health, and that many business owners are having to work from home. They're often geographically isolated and socially isolated in rural areas. And this has caused enormous psychological problems. And that's been documented in the literature and through national surveys. So while there is enormous talk at the moment about business resilience, there is very little consideration of mental health as being part of business resilience. But that seems to me a very important part of it. So it may be that in future, the support agencies for business support need to become more wider and think about business resilience, particularly in rural areas, to embrace those wider mental health support systems. So I hope those ideas have been thought-provoking and are useful in the light of INNOGROW. If you're interested, you can have a look at the website for the new National Innovation Centre, and it'd be great to discuss some of these issues with our partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. It has indeed been a thought-provoking presentation, and there have been questions raised. So if you can please stick around for the next open dialogue session as a panelist, so you can perhaps share also your understanding and your responses to our attendees' questions. So at this stage, we're going to have another coffee break and get ready for the open dialogue session that will follow in 15 minutes, where we will have representatives from regional authorities and managing authorities, and also experts from the INNOGROW project to discuss attendees' questions and rural economy innovation topics. So see you all back here in 15 minutes.